Hello and welcome to this special bonus video from the Project Bag podcast. This is not a usual episode. If you are wondering what's happening, are you seeing double? Has it hit autoplay? No, I am recording a second video for the Project Bag channel today, going through my finished objects of 2020 because believe it or not, I've actually finished some things. I discovered that not only have I completed my 20 items in 2020 target, but exceeded it. I thought that was cause for celebration and to look back and see just how I managed to do it. So I've done a little bit of research. I shall bring up my note page here. Okay, so this year I have completed, I can't say knit and crocheted in general, because some of these were whips, some of them from a couple of years ago, but by the by, I have completed 24 out of 20 projects, so that is 120%. Check me out. This year I have knit 3 pairs of socks, 5 adult garments. That's the big surprise. 5 adult garments, like what? 3 hats and a headband, 1 shawl, 4 scarves, 1 blanket, 2 kids' garments, 2 toys, 1 item for the household, and 1 dog jumper. The first thing I finished in 2020 were my dad's Christmas socks that had been intended as a gift for him at least 2 years prior. These were socks that were knit flat from the book Knit Your Socks on Straight. They were my first attempt at sock knitting, and the first sock went really well, but then I got second sock syndrome in a very big way. These were knit out of some bright green Stylecraft Special DK, which is really soft. It's an acrylic yarn, commercial, very affordable, and washes up beautifully. I must admit, having now been knitting socks in the round for quite some time, quite some years actually, I'm not that keen to carry on knitting socks on straight needles. However, if knitting in the round is just something that you are not ready to do yet, don't want to do, no interest in doing, then Knit Your Socks on Straight is a very good book to start with. My next finished object of 2020 was also completing the second of a pair of socks. I had started the first sock in 2019, in June, 29th of June 2019, even know the day. So here are my Tequila Sunrise socks, which is a West Yorkshire Spinners yarn from their cocktail range. It's self-striping, and I did heels, obligatory Gemma hair, cuff, heel and toe in a almost perfectly coordinating shade of Socks Yeah 4-ply, which is by Coop Knits. And again, commercial, slightly dearer, 50 grams, it's £6.25 I believe, and the West Yorkshire Spinners retails now at £7.50 a ball, but I thought it was really worth it. And this features an afterthought heel, so that is where you knit your tube, and then you decide where you want your heel and you cut into your knitting. That was a skill I learned in 2019 thanks to my lovely friend Amy, who literally sat me down and made me do it. And I actually have no regrets. I was terrified of first cutting into my knitting, but I will quite happily chop into anything now. She's made me into some sort of monster. But basically all you do is you cut in, you pick up 30 stitches or 34 depending on what cast on you've got, your stitches there and there on needles, and then you effectively knit a toe. If you look there, that is the same as that. You are knitting another toe, so it couldn't be simpler. Does mean double the Kitchener stitching, but I must admit, after putting in several afterthought heels for my shows in 2019, I think I'm getting pretty good at it. So that's 1 and 2 of 2020. Where did I go next? Well, next was the 5 PM cardigan. This is a super chunky cardigan pattern from Erica Knight, designed for her maxi yarn, which is super chunky. Not quite super duper chunky like my super duper chunky yarn, but it's pretty super chunky. It was a really quick knit. I omitted the pockets because it is knit at such a loose gauge that even if you sew the pockets on really well, you end up looking like you haven't because you can poke your fingers through the fabric. It was a quick knit. It was heavy, really heavy, but it was very enjoyable and satisfying. It's a unisex cardigan. The pattern shows it on a female model, but I had my lovely friend Rune model it for me for a photo shoot, and I have to say, he looks a bit better in it than me. So I had more than a little help in finishing some of my objects this year. The sewing up is definitely something that's defeated me, and I have a very good and long-suffering friend, Vic, who has done a little bit of sewing up for me. I believe I'm right in saying Vic sewed up the 5 PM cardigan, because I had just had it with it at that point. It was a quick knit, it was a knit for the day job, and so it needed to happen fairly fast. But my next finished object, this time now in February, so we've had 2 in January, one, the 5 PM cardigan was in February, and now this was also in February. This is Yarny. Now he is a fantastic little video game character. And the idea is basically he is made of yarn and has to go and untangle yarn, work his way through various levels and over various obstacles. This was made for a mutual friend of mine and my husband's, who streams, and she was streaming this particular game. She lives in the US, she's absolutely lovely, and so I made her a Yarny, and Vic very kindly stuffed Yarny and did Yarny's eyes. This was my first real foray into I-cords, which I was absolutely delighted with. I am now passionately in love with I-cords. I want to do them on absolutely everything, and watch out for them on some new designs in 2021. Moving on to February the 29th. It was the shortest month, but I finished 3 objects. I did the simple sweater. Again, this was a sample for the day job, again by Erica Knight, again in Maxi Yarn. Now, I have a major problem with this pattern, gonna be completely honest. First of all, the way that Erica has you do the decreases for the neckline shaping makes the decreases lie a really strange way, so I just swapped them around. But my major issue with it is the bust sizing. Now, obviously everyone is aware of the discussions about size inclusivity with garments at the moment in the industry, particularly with independent designs. And, you know, if you look back at patterns from the 1950s, for example, their large bust sizes are 34. I mean, that's just bonkers. But this one, in a chunky yarn, the largest bust size was a 42. Now, I am a 42.5-inch bust, and I struggled in this sweater. And it actually made me feel really sad and really uncomfortable. And I'm in a place where I actually kind of love my body right now. I love me. I'm pleased to be me. But this sweater made me feel pretty pants. So, I mean, if you want a simple quick knit sweater, go for it. But just be aware that this does come up short and it does come up small. Moving on, we've then got my first little baby garment. I did a fur gilet. I finished this in March. Again, it's an Erica Knight pattern. This time in Erica Knight fur yarn. I just thought it'd be really sweet for one of the little girls that was due this year. Spoiler, haven't gifted it yet, will be sending it in the new year, but I did the bigger size so it will still fit her, and also it's cold now, so she'll get some use out of it, hopefully. Quite a quick knit, not great yarn to work with if you're doing increases and decreases and doing it in front of the telly, because it's really hard to read your knitting, but cannot fault how fast it was to do. My second finished object of March 2020 was a big chunky cabled scarf. There is definitely a theme appearing here. Once again, it was Erica Knight in Maxi Yarn. This was the point. The reason I'm knitting so much in Erica Knight at this point is because I was furloughed, or about to be furloughed from the day job. The shops were shut, pandemic had started, and you know, there was very little that I could actually do. I was spending a lot of time in front of the computer setting up a website, but then my downtime that I did find myself with some, I used it to knit samples for my day job as well. So that is the reason I was knitting with so much commercial yarn and so much Erica Knight. It was a really fun cable to do. It was big and chunky and squishy, and I did end up going on to knit the matching hat and headband, which I will just put here as well, pictures of, because why not? It's all done in the same yarn. This is done in maxi and fur combined. Quite liked the hat actually. I've not got a head for hats, but I felt kind of cute in this one. So the next one was another long languishing whip, and I was so pleased to get this one off the needles. It was the Drops Design jumper that I knit from pattern book borrowed from my long suffering friend Myra, who lent me the books back in 2017. And I cast on a sweater. She got me knitting again. This was when I really wasn't knitting much. I was off work. I was very ill with depression and anxiety. And I'd lost all interest in everything. And as well as podcasts getting me through, my friend Myra got me through helping me to knit again. So I cast this on in some hand-dyed cotton variegated yarn that I got from my local yarn store in Maidstone, Hop Stitch and Jumper. Check them out, they're great. And I knit it for my grandma because no one had ever knit for my grandma. And long-term viewers of the podcast will remember this saga. It had some really interesting waist shaping, which made it not too dissimilar to the great saddlebag jumper of 2019 that Amy knit, or 2018. And so I had to rip right back to the top. But when I started, I actually swatched and I said to my grandma, I think you might need this size. She's like, no, I will need this size. And it's quite a small size. And I'm thinking, really, grandma? Really? She said, yeah, quite confident. Fine, I'll do as I'm told because I'm a good granddaughter. Grandma had been basing her thought that she needed the much smaller size on the fact that I usually knit so loosely that a baby jumper would fit a 3-year-old. She wasn't counting on me doing it properly. So I eventually finished this in April 2020, delivered it to my grandmother with great pride, and it was too small and it fits my mum. So my mum has stolen it. So spoiler alert, 2021, there's gonna be another one of those jumpers on the needles, this time for my lovely, lovely grandma. Next was a case of Gemma being a terrible test knitter. I finished the Frozen Fractal Puppy Sweater. Now, this sweater has had a tale of woe happen to it. It did go through the washing machine on not a wool wash, but it hasn't shrunk too much. It still just about fits the dog. And the colour work, although looking slightly less pristine, pretty proud of it. This was only my 3rd colour work project. So my first one were the Selbu mittens by Skein that I knit back in 2018. And I think I finished them in 2019. Or was it 2019? No, I picked up the yarn for them in 2018, so I must have... Anyway, at some point in the past, I did the Selbu mittens by Skein and then I did the Simpler Sinister Sweater by Mana, who's in Cutting Biag, who does all the Sinister Cat things. And that was my first colourwork garment, but it wasn't terribly intense. This was my first all-over colourwork project that was bigger than a mitten. It was a sweater for my gorgeous handsome pup, and I've got a lovely picture of him wearing it before the felting incident here, which I shall put up at Christmas. And I just love this pattern. I learned a lot about shaping and adapting patterns with this one. It was also my first I-cord, applied I-cord edging on the armholes, which I think is brilliant. Definitely worth doing, I think probably for kids as well as animals, if you're having armhole cast off edges. Yeah, I definitely look into doing that for children's garments. And yeah, I used the Croft Shetland in, oh God, what was the colour? Norwick, a dark blue. And I used Falkland Merino Aran in the duck egg colourway. These were things I just happened to have in stash, and luckily the sweater still fits him because I love him. But do I love him £30 of sweater each time? Possibly not. It's designed by Megan Reagan, Bad Wolf Girl Sits and Knits. I adore her designs. There is actually a human version of the Frozen Fractal sweater, which I'm really tempted to make. I don't know, is that too much? Matchy with your puppy? Let me know in the comments below. We then have our first crochet entry. A long while ago, I was given this Elsa doll to crochet because it had been passed around to several people at a group to crochet it for a child, and they hadn't managed, and actually I don't blame them. I bent the crochet hook. The crochet hook started like that, it ended up like that. It was incredibly tight. It was using very squeaky, scratchy acrylic, the sort that actually hurts your fingers to work with. Now, I am not a yarn snob by any stretch of the imagination. There is a place and a time for a beautiful, well-made acrylic yarn that washes up like a dream, children, that's a really good place for them. And blankets, actually. But this was just, it actually hurt to do. And it was on such a small scale. I'm all for amigurumi, but wowzers. That was a baptism of fire, that one. But I am super, super proud that I got this project finished. I did it all apart from the facial features, the hair and the embroidery. I said I'd do the crochet and I handed it off. So my work here is done. To my knowledge, still hasn't been finished. May was a really, really exciting month for me here at the Project Bag, specifically for the Project Bag designs. It saw the release of my quick spring knit, the Spring Fling Scarflet. I designed this using a skein of truly hooked in cotton Aran weight yarn that I'd had for well over a year in stash. Beautiful, didn't know what to do with it, didn't want to put it with anything else, needed a one skein wonder. So I set about designing a lightweight scarflet that you could fling about your neck in keep the chill off in those spring breezy evenings. I released this as a free pattern on Ravelry, and to my absolute astonishment, it hit the number 23 on Ravelry's Hot Right Now pattern list, and I was just watching it climb, feeling utterly bewildered. Couldn't believe it. I just wow. You know, I mean, thoughts about Ravelry aside, it's a pretty good indicator of how patterns are doing with the Hot Right Now list, and to be up there with people like sandwiched by people like Hohi Locatelli and Jennifer Steingast and people like that, and little old me with my little free pattern. I then did another rendition of it, this time in a linen DK weight that I got from the day job. It's Erica Knight Studio Linen, and they have formed the basis of some kits this year which have been a sellout, which is just crackers, to be honest with you, utterly crackers. I could not be happier with how this little design is done. And it's really funny because I've worked on some designs before and really sort of laboured over them, and this was just something I knocked up almost without thinking about it, and it's been my biggest hit easily. It has been downloaded hundreds of times on Ravelry. Not sure about anywhere else. I'm looking into hosting my patterns in other platforms as well. But yeah, that's just absolutely crackers and definitely one of the highlights of my year. This brings us into June, which was another bumper year for finishing things. I finished about 4 projects in June, the most important of which was the Calypso cardigan. The Calypso cardigan really did signal the end of an era for me here on the Project Bag podcast. I think maybe the writing was on the wall then that things were going to change. I started the Calypso cardigan. It's not called the Calypso cardigan. It's knit in King Cole Calypso yarn. I started it way back in 2017. 2018, I made really, really good progress on it. And then as with all things, I just ground to an inexplicable halt. I worked really hard to get it finished and then realised that one side was longer than the other because tension. But I finally finished it and gifted it to its intended recipient, who had given up knitting it because she was finding the yarn too hard to work with. It was quite kinky. It was definitely 2 fibres held together, but it had been kind of crimped, and it was quite splitty and not very easy to work with. I mean, the actual finish was lovely if you don't want pristine stocking stitch, if you want that kind of wibbly wobbly 80s crimp effect. It was a really nice cardigan, thankfully with no buttonholes. I tell you what though, that rib band was a killer. I have learnt that I do not like long bands of rib. Hold me to that when I release a design that has long bands of rib. Say, oi Gemma, what you doing? But yeah, she actually had forgotten that it was being knit for her. It had been that long. So I'm really pleased she's pleased with it and is getting lots of wear out of it. But yeah, I think a few people felt a bit bereft when that stopped making an appearance on the podcast. The next one I am super proud of. I set about making something for one of my lovely honorary nephews, Theon. He was turning 5 this year. He's gone to school. They're so grown up, and like lots and lots of people watching now, I have been separated from people I love in my life because pandemic. And that includes several children who are really, really dear to me. My godchildren, my honorary nieces and nephews. And so I thought, I'm going to send Theon knitted something for his birthday. He hasn't had anything knitted from me for quite some time, since he was quite little, and I'm going to send this to him now. Yeah, I just picked a sleeveless hoodie thinking that'll be quick. Hoods take a lot of knitting. But also I figured I probably won't be knitting for him much longer because he is growing quite quickly, and 5-year-olds are not quite adult sized obviously, but that's a lot more knitting than in a baby garment. I used the, I think it was called the Humbug sweater hoodie pattern. It was in a magazine from some years ago. I've tried to find it on the internet, and I will put links to all these patterns below, by the way, and where you can get them if you want to work them. And I loved the pattern so much, I used King Cole Paint Box DK in a kind of khaki fatigue green, and for the stripes I used my own hand-dyed yarn in the neutral tones colourway that I had left over from the simpler Sinister sweater. I think little bands of hand-dyed yarn, perfect in this, and I was sent some really lovely photos of a very happy little boy wearing his hoodie from his Auntie Gemmy. Also, I got it sent on time, pretty much, almost, nearly. The next was another long whip. I'd started it in September 2019. September 2019. It was the Mama DIY mystery shawl, also known as the Vida shawl. I met Cecilia at Perth Festival of Yarn, where else, and she was releasing a mystery knit along later that month, and of course I wanted to take part. I knit this out of Aurora Borealis and Warning in the project bag 4-ply, which is a merino nylon blend. Aurora Borealis will be reimagined and returned to the Midnight Diary store on a different base in the new year, so do look out for that. This was not my first shawl I've knit. It's my second, I think, that I've knit to completion, but I do have a fair few still on the needles, so there will be lots of shawls coming in future episodes. My next one is a super chunky cowl. This is my first hand knit, and I mean hand knit, done in my super duper chunky yarn. We are coming to the end now. This was a brand new base for the project bag / Midnight Diary that I brought in just as a one-off in winter 2020, and I absolutely love it. It is my plan to do more with this base and going forward, particularly more designing. So we will have a look at that and see what I can do. The cowl is basically one whole ball. It's 250 grams of this chain plied or chainette, so it's almost like an I-cord basically. Super duper chunky merino roving yarn, and I just ended up finger knitting it. I never did record a video showing how to do it, so I might have to do that soon. We are now back to knits and things for the day job. I did a fur cushion cover, which I don't have a picture of. I will try and find one, in Erica Knight's fur yarn. It was really quick. We did it envelope style, so we cast on X number of stitches, knit X number of inches, folded it over, sewed it up, shoved a cushion in, done. That's all there is to it, really. Oh, I've done 25 things! I've done 25 things! Hang on! Next thing was my simple slouch snuggle hat, which I designed using Dovestone Chunky, which is a natural yarn from Baramu. It is sadly discontinued, but there's a little shop I know that still has some. And I designed this to become a kit form, and the lovely Roz modelled it for me. It used just one skein of yarn, and I worked it up in an evening while we were watching Boris talking to us about the next lockdown that was going to happen from November. It's amazing the kind of the way the pandemic sort of gives you landmarks really through the year for the things you were making. Where were you when Boris was announcing that we were going to have another mini lockdown? I was sitting watching Boris knitting the snuggle slouchy hat. That pattern is actually going to be released in the new year for the Midnight Diary. Then I have a bit of a tale of woe. I got this amazing new yarn, Rowan Cozy Merino, which is merino yak and cashmere. It's absolutely gorgeous. It's a boucle kind of yarn, so it's got a little bit of texture, but it's so soft. And so I decided to knit up some of the free It comes with a collection of free patterns with it. And I decided that we were all going to have a go at knitting one up. And I picked the cabled beanie, which is absolutely beautiful, but it has you do it on size 8 and then size 9 needles, holding this yarn, which is a chunky, not a super chunky, a chunky single. Nowhere does it say knit double. That's what it looked like. So I finished it. I'd sewed it up. I sewed it up. I did all the things, wove all the ends in, and then I ripped it out. But I'm counting it as a finished object. Next is another little kit project. It's a really, really simple cowl. It's a 1x1 rib using Debbie Bliss Laza, which is yak and cashmere again. It was, again, super simple, made for the day job. But do you know what? It's something, and I finished it, and I'm counting it. 25. Yeah. Now we are on to the final 2 finished objects of 2020. Thank you for coming on this wild ride with me through what I have knit and crocheted. So this one I'm wearing, it is the Weekender. I finished it about 2:30 in the morning on the 30th of December. I stayed up to weave the ends in and everything. I talk about this at length on my current podcast episode, which is about to go up. It's my second rendition of the Weekender sweater. I'm still not convinced about this neckline. You can see it's starting to go a bit red there where this is sort of pulling a little bit, but it is a big, comfy, cozy sweater. A bit like the Boxy by Joji Locatelli. I think this will probably become a staple in my wardrobe. Aran weight yarn, the Croft Shetland Aran tweed in Marister colourway, which is utterly beautiful. It was one of these that when it came in the shop, I just had to have it, so I did. And my final finished object of 2020, which is literally hot off the needles at 12 o'clock midday on New Year's Eve today, 31st of December, in case you didn't know when New Year's Eve. What an idiot. What an idiot. New Year's Eve, 12 o'clock New Year's Eve, 31st of December, are the toe bean socks. I have lost the other one of these, so I better hope that I can find it before I need to gift it to its intended recipient, Roz, for her Christmas present. This is by Grenade Creations, the lovely Kirsty, who is adorable and I love, and she's a real sweetheart and a very talented designer. Yeah, basically this is hot off the needles. This is in my Peach Melba colourway, which was a project bag limited edition, i.e. dyed it, forgot what I did, can't repeat it. But I do have big plans for this come the new year. So that is that. That's it. That's it. Those are my 25 finished objects of 2020. I am not going to nail my colours to the mast and say how many I want to finish in 2021, but this is for all those people who've seen my whip board and said you really should finish things. I do finish things. It couldn't be clearer that I clearly finish things. I don't know how many whips are on my whip board at the moment. I have yet to go through everything. I will do so, and I will share that with you, I am sure, at some point. I hope you've enjoyed this bonus tour of my finished objects. Thank you to everyone who's given me the opportunity to knit for them, to work with their yarns, to work with their patterns. Thank you to the designers who've allowed me to test knit. And I look forward to doing lots more creative things in 2021. How many things have you worked on this year? What is your favourite finished object of 2020? Have you had any things that have just had to be frogged? I'd love to know. Let me know in the comments down below. And whatever you're up to this New Year's Eve, I hope it is cosy, safe, happy, and that 2021 is just an improvement. Take care. Bye.